Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, 2 people are reported dead and at least 7 injured after a shooting at Florida State University. Police say the suspect, the son of a sheriff's deputy, is in custody. David Lam has what we know so far. President Trump says top levels of the Chinese regime are talking with the U.S. amid escalating tariffs. What he reveals about a potential timeline for a deal and what he tells Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni during her visit. Iris Tao at the White House. The U.S. is waiting for a response from Russia regarding a Ukraine ceasefire deal. Arian Pazdar has what President Trump says about an expected answer from Russian President Vladimir Putin. Top U.S. officials are in Paris today meeting with Ukrainian and European leaders. They're discussing the war in Ukraine as efforts to reach a ceasefire deal with Russia have stalled. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details. Israel is planning to keep parts of the Gaza Strip even after an end to the war. Meanwhile, Iran sends a private letter to Russian President Putin ahead of Iran's nuclear talks with the U.S. Jason Perry reports. And the Trump administration dials up the pressure on Harvard University, now threatening to revoke its eligibility to host international students. Plus, a decision on its tax-exempt status is expected soon.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Police have secured the campus at Florida State University after a shooting this afternoon. 2 people are reported dead, and at least 7 have been hospitalized. Law enforcement have identified a suspect who is in custody. NTD's David Lam reports.
At Florida State University, campus-wide activities were paused on Thursday as first responders investigated a school shooting. According to authorities, there were 2 fatalities and at least 7 people hospitalized, including the alleged gunman.
The shooter is 20-year-old Phoenix Eichner, and he's the son of a Lynn County Sheriff deputy. Our deputy Eichner, has been with the Lynn County Sheriff's Office for over 18 years. She has a tremendous job that she's done. Her service to this community has been exceptional.
The university issued an alert at around noon local time about an active shooter, advising students to shelter in place.
Just sitting down doing my work and the alarm goes off. At first you're thinking it's just a fire alarm. It sounds a little different though. And I'm just hearing active shooter and you kind of just like panic a little bit in the moment.
Law enforcement says the suspect used a handgun and was in possession of a shotgun.
After like 20 minutes, they told us to put our hands up, and we come out to like first armed security and all that, and they told us to have our hands up and walk out here.
FBI Director Kash Patel said the FBI Jackson team is on the ground assisting. President Trump also responded.
These things are terrible, but the gun doesn't do the shooting, the people do. It's, a phrase that's used probably too often. I will tell you that it's a shame. I'm just hearing about it now. I just hear about it. I know the area very well. I know the school very well.
Tallahassee police say multiple law enforcement agencies remain on site for the ongoing investigation. The FBI is requesting that people provide or upload any information or recordings related to the shooting to www.fbi.gov/FSU shooting. David Lam, NTD News.
President Trump reveals that the U.S. and China are actively talking amid escalating tariffs. He also promises a trade deal with Europe as Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni becomes the first European leader to visit the White House amid the new reciprocal tariffs. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. First, what came out of the Trump-Meloni meeting today?
Good evening to you as well, Tiv. As President Trump today welcomed Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni to the White House, he said that he believes 100% the U.S. will reach a trade deal with Europe before the end of the 90-day pause on some reciprocal tariffs. And Meloni also announcing some progress here, saying that Trump has accepted an invitation from her to visit Rome in the near future, adding that Trump is considering the possibility of meeting with more European officials using that occasion. And Meloni asked that they together want to make the West great again. Watch.
She has taken Europe by storm. She's become a friend, and we really have a great relationship.
So I think even if we have some problems, okay, between the two shores of the Atlantic, it is the time that we try to sit down and find solutions. The goal for me is to make the West great again, okay? And I think we can do it together.
We can.
Meanwhile, in just recent weeks, President Trump has said that he believes the European Union was created to screw the United States. But White House officials told us that they believe that President Trump wants Meloni to become a bridge between him and other European leaders. Meloni has a great relationship with Trump. She was the only European leader invited and attended Trump's inauguration back in January. And we were also there when Trump actually invited her to Mar-a-Lago in Florida, and they dined together and watched a movie together. Meanwhile, today, Trump also says that he wants to have more progress, and progress is happening very quickly with other countries, adding that the U.S. is the one setting the deals. Watch.
Everybody wants to make a deal, and if they don't want to make a deal, we'll make the deal for them. We're listening, and we're going to be very fair to people, but, you know, we're the one that really sets the deal, and that's what.
And after talking with Japanese officials just yesterday at the White House, Trump says South Korea will be coming in next week, and that they're also talking with India. Back to you.
And Iris, President Trump today also talked about ongoing negotiations with China. Tell us more about that.
Sure. So President Trump today, while declining to say whether he has talked directly with China's Xi Jinping, Trump reveals that the top levels of the Chinese regime are talking with the U.S. after he announced his increased tariffs on China to 145% just last week. And Trump asked that he wants to reach a deal with China within the next 3 to 4 weeks, expecting talks to conclude within that time frame. But he also asked that if they don't reach a deal, he might just keep and set up tariffs. And although he says that China does want and to keep the U.S. market, and that's why they will need to negotiate. Watch.
I would say they have reached out a number of times. I think we're going to make a deal with China. We're going to make a deal with everybody. And if we don't make a deal, we'll just set a target, and we'll live with that. And we're a big, beautiful store, and everybody wants a piece of that store. China wants it.
And today, President Trump also dismissed concerns over China now attempting to win over some trading partners of the U.S. Trump says that he believes no country can compete with the U.S. Back to you, Tiff.
All right, Iris, thanks for those updates. Top U.S. officials are in Paris today, meeting with Ukrainian and European allies. They're discussing the Russia-Ukraine war as both sides accuse each other of violating a partial ceasefire. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio and presidential envoy Steve Witkoff are meeting with top Ukrainian and European officials in Paris. The talks are taking place as both Russia and Ukraine say they're taking fire by drones. Ukraine agreed to President Trump's ceasefire proposal last month, but Russia rejected it. Russia says that any ceasefire must be on the condition that Ukraine stop receiving weapons from NATO allies. But Kiev has rejected that. The two sides have agreed on curbing their attacks on energy infrastructure and at sea, but both sides accuse each other of violating that partial ceasefire every day. Just 2 weeks ago, Secretary Rubio said to NATO allies in Brussels that we would soon know if Russia's serious about peace talks.
And now the civilized world waits to see if Russia is indeed serious.
Meanwhile, the Chinese regime has long been the largest supporter of Russia's war machine, but they're also heavily supporting Iran and its proxy terrorist groups like the Houthis in Yemen.
There is a Chinese company providing satellite imagery to the Houthis. the Houthis. Even after we've engaged in discussions with them about this, the fact that they continue to do this is unacceptable. And we urge our partners to judge the CCP and Chinese companies, again, on their actions and not their words.
After the talks in Paris conclude Friday, Witkoff will travel to Rome to meet with the Iranian foreign minister for the second time in 2 weeks.
The bright red line is that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon.
Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
As U.S. officials are in Europe negotiating peace, fighting between Russia and Ukraine continues. President Trump says Russia is expected to respond to a ceasefire proposal this week. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the war update.
Explosions rang through the Ukrainian city of Dnipro amid a reported Russian attack early Thursday. Ukrainian officials say the strike killed 3 civilians, including a 17-year-old girl.
A girl ran into the building and it just collapsed right there. We don't even know whether it was the blast wave or a door that hit her.
The attack reportedly caused extensive damage to civilian infrastructure, including a school, post office, shops and more. Meanwhile, on the other side of the front line, a large explosion shocked the Russian town of Shuya. Russia's military reports destroying 7 Ukrainian drones in the region. Ukraine says Russia's missile brigade in Shuya is responsible for a Sunday attack which reportedly killed 35 civilians. Kyiv and Moscow keep accusing each other of violating a 30-day ceasefire on energy and infrastructure. President Trump suggests both sides should do more to stop the fighting.
On average, think of it, every week 2,500 people are being killed, mostly soldiers, Russian, Ukrainian soldiers.
Trump recently made a ceasefire proposal to Russian President Vladimir Putin. On Thursday, Trump was asked how much time Russia has to respond before the U.S. imposes more sanctions.
We'll see what that will be. We're going to be hearing from them this week, very shortly actually, and we'll see, but we wanted to stop.
And also in Russia on Thursday, the country's Supreme Court is lifting the Taliban's designation as a terrorist group. Now, some Russian officials say that there is a need to engage with the Taliban. Thursday's ruling came after a request by the Prosecutor General's office.
The court's decision to suspend the ban on the activities of the Taliban movement is subject to immediate execution.
The decision means that making contact with the Taliban is no longer punishable under Russian law. Some Russian officials claim the contact is needed to help stabilize Afghanistan. The U.S. still recognizes the Taliban as a terrorist organization. The group maintains diplomatic ties with countries including China and the United Arab Emirates. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
And today, President Trump said the U.S. and Ukraine could sign a deal on critical minerals as early as next week. The deal was first floated in February before a meeting between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office that turned contentious. Israeli forces have now taken over about 30% of the Gaza Strip, and Israel's defense minister says they are planning to keep that land even after the war ends. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader sends a private letter to Russian President Vladimir Putin as Iran and the U.S. prepare for a second round of talks on a possible nuclear deal. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest.
Fires blazed in a tent camp in the southern Gaza Strip after an Israeli airstrike reportedly hit the area on Wednesday night. A firefighter was seen trying to put out the flames while others searched through the smoldering ashes. The next day, a resident said his sister and her children were killed in the strike.
We managed to rescue some bodies. The bodies were charred. There is no safe place. Where are we even supposed to go? People ran to the sea last night, trying to save themselves, throwing themselves into the water.
On Thursday, Israel said their Air Force had struck 110 terrorist targets throughout the Gaza Strip in the previous 2 days. And an Israeli airstrike reportedly hit another tent in the northern Gaza Strip, and also a building that was used to shelter displaced residents. Israeli forces have said they take numerous steps before the strikes to mitigate harm to civilians. Israeli troops have also been operating on the ground in the Gaza Strip and taking more territory as they go. As of now, Israel has reportedly taken over about 30% of the Gaza Strip, including a corridor that completely blocks off Rafah from the rest of the territory. And Israel's defense minister said in a statement on Wednesday that Israel is planning to keep those security zones even after the war ends. Israel and other countries are also keeping a close eye on Iran amid ongoing talks with the U.S. on a possible nuclear deal. On Thursday, Iran's supreme leader sent a letter to Russian President Vladimir Putin to update him on the nuclear negotiations with the United States. The letter was delivered by Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi. And on the same day, the defense minister of Saudi Arabia was in Iran, where he met with Iran's supreme leader ahead of the nuclear talks. And the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency said it should be involved in the nuclear talks between Iran and the United States. Meanwhile, President Trump on Thursday was asked whether he had waved off Israeli plans to attack Iranian nuclear facilities.
I wouldn't say waved off. I'm not in a rush to do it because I think that Iran has a chance to have a great country and to live happily without death. And I'd like to see that. That's my first option. I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt anybody. I really don't. But Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. It's, pretty simple.
The next talks between the United States and Iran is set to take place on Saturday and will be held in Rome. Jason Perry, NTD News.
In the battle between the Trump administration and Harvard University, the Internal Revenue Service is mulling over the school's tax-exempt status and expected to decide soon. Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security is threatening to take away the university's ability to enroll foreign students. NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards has the details.
The Trump administration is doubling down after Harvard University refused to make changes to its hiring, admissions, and curriculum policies. After the refusal, the administration cut $2.2 billion in federal funding to the school. And now the IRS is expected to soon decide whether to revoke the university's tax-exempt status. Federal tax exemption granted by the IRS allows the wealthy Ivy League university to not pay perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars a year in taxes. Donations to the school are tax deductible. In order to maintain the tax-exempt status, an organization must be registered as a nonprofit and have a purpose that meets the agency's criteria, such as charitable, religious, or educational. There are some restrictions, such as none of its earnings can go to a private shareholder or individual, and it can't get involved in politics. Universities like Harvard apply for this status to save money and attract donations from wealthy individuals. But the IRS can revoke a university's status if it finds it violated the terms of the eligibility, like supporting a political candidate or engaging in for-profit activities. According to the agency, it receives complaints of abuse every year from various sources, including the public and members of Congress. Federal law prohibits individuals, including the president, from requesting that the IRS conduct an audit of a taxpayer. White House spokesman Harrison Fields told the New York Times that the agency was investigating Harvard before the president made a public call for Harvard to pay taxes. Harvard said to the news outlet in a statement that there was no legal basis to rescind its tax status, and that any attempt to do so would likely face a legal challenge. A Bloomberg News analysis estimated that Harvard's tax benefits totaled $465 million in 2023. The university reported it had collected more than $525 million in donations in the 2024 fiscal year. As we wait for the tax agency's final decision, on Wednesday, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said Harvard could lose its ability to host international students. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
An appeals court today shot down the Trump administration's appeal of a Maryland judge's order to, quote, facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia from an El Salvador prison. The three-judge panel said it supports the lower court's efforts to carry out the Supreme Court's recent decision. This comes after a senator was denied access to speak with Abrego Garcia in jail. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more on the ongoing debate.
El Salvador national Kilmar Abrego Garcia is entering his second month in jail after being deported from the U.S. The DOJ later called the deportation an administrative error. Senator Chris Van Hollen represents Garcia's family in Maryland. The senator went to El Salvador's maximum security prison on Wednesday to meet with Garcia, where he was denied entry.
And I won't stop trying, and I can assure the president, the vice president, that I may be the first United States senator to visit El Salvador on this issue, but there will be more, and there will be more members of Congress coming.
The country's vice president said the American embassy should make arrangements instead.
His answer was that the Trump administration is paying El Salvador, the government of El Salvador, to keep him at CCOT.
Democrats continue to amplify the issue, arguing that the man was illegally abducted. They say there's no evidence that Garcia is a member of the MS-13 gang, a terrorist organization. The Trump administration, though, has publicized documents alleging his gang affiliation.
He was stopped in 2019 by the anti-gang squad. They stopped him at a Home Depot with 3 other members. The police officers, the gang unit, declared him as a member of MS-13, and also they independently went to a reliable, confidential informant who said not only is he a member of MS-13, he gave them the clique, the Westerns.
Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The Supreme Court today kept on hold President Trump's restrictions on birthright citizenship, but agreed to hear arguments on the issue in May. Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship for the children of people who are in the U.S. illegally has been halted nationwide by 3 district courts around the country. The Trump administration had sought to narrow those orders to allow for the policy to take effect in parts or most of the country while court challenges play out. That is expected to be the focus of the high court arguments on May 15th. The president has been pushing to end birthright citizenship since returning to office. It gives legal citizenship to all children born in the country, regardless of the citizenship of their parents. Here's Trump speaking on the Supreme Court's decision to hear the case.
Well, you're just telling me that for the first time. I am so happy. I think the case has been so misunderstood. That case, birthright citizenship, is about slavery. They use it for people that come into our country and they walk in and all of a sudden they become citizens and they pay a lot of money to different cartels and others. It's all about slavery, and if you look at it that way, we should win that case.
Coming up, could the Menendez brothers get a new sentence after 35 years behind bars? Today, the high-profile case returns to a Los Angeles courtroom. Christina Corona reports. Does Google hold a monopoly in online advertising? The top result from a judge is yes. The ruling was handed down to the search giant in its antitrust case. Stay tuned for that after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. More than 30 years after their conviction for murdering their parents, Eric and Lyle Menendez appeared virtually in a Los Angeles courtroom as their resentencing hearing begins. NTD's Christina Corona brings us more from Van Nuys, California.
We're here outside the Van Nuys courthouse where Eric and Lyle Menendez appeared virtually via video link as their resentencing hearing gets underway. The brothers were convicted of murdering their parents Jose and Kitty Menendez back in 1989 at their Beverly Hills home. The brothers have now been in prison for 35 years. The hearing is expected to focus on how the brothers have spent their 3 decades behind bars. The judge will look at evidence, hear from witnesses, and ultimately determine whether Eric and Lyle should be resentenced. Inside the courtroom, media reports say the brothers were seen sitting side by side in blue prison jumpsuits. This comes as prosecutors in the Menendez brothers case have filed a motion Wednesday to delay today's resentencing hearing, saying they need more time to review newly completed psychological evaluations. District Attorney Nathan Hochman says they believe it holds additional facts that the court should consider in deciding whether or not the Menendez brothers do pose a risk of danger to society.
They look at all the records, the prison records, the interview records, the reports in the prison. They talk to various people throughout the prison system about the Menendez brothers, and then they prepared a report that analyzes their view of the comprehensive risk that the Menendez pose of potentially being a danger to society.
The report was not shared with the defense, which attorney Mark Garagos called unfair.
I would ask you to ask the DA that. I would ask you to ask the DA why at the last minute he does a Hail Mary filing of a motion to continue and does not notify any of the victims or the victim's lawyer. Why? What is going on? Whose interest is he vindicating?
The hearing has been paused for several hours for clarification on the comprehensive risk assessment report.
The judge will hear arguments Thursday and Friday, but said there will be no decision on resentencing in the next 2 days. Reporting from the city of Van Nuys, Christina Corona, NTD News.
A federal judge ruled today that Google monopolizes online advertising technology. The decision marks another blow to the tech giant in an antitrust case brought by the Department of Justice. The ruling could allow prosecutors to argue for a breakup of Google's advertising products. The DOJ said the company should have to sell off at least its Google Ad Manager. The platform includes the company's publisher ad server and its ad exchange. Google now faces the possibility of 2 different courts ordering it to sell assets or change its business practices. A judge in Washington will hold a trial in April on whether to make Google sell its Chrome browser. Google has explored selling off its ad exchange to cooperate with European antitrust regulators as well. Coming up, amid trade tensions with the U.S., Beijing is strengthening its alliances with authoritarian regimes worldwide. Luis Martinez has the latest moves from the Chinese regime. A congressional committee is warning Americans about DeepSeek and its ability to implement Chinese censorship laws. Jason Blair brings us the key takeaways. And according to the Wall Street Journal, the Trump administration is reportedly seeking trade deals with 70 countries that would isolate China. Casey Fleming, National Security Advisor and CEO of Black Ops Partners, joins us to discuss after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Chinese Communist Party is strengthening its alliances with authoritarian regimes worldwide. It's also calling for an informal meeting of the UN General Assembly to discuss international trade as new U.S. tariffs hit China. NTD's Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more.
The government of Cambodia has handed over approximately 180 Taiwanese nationals to the Chinese Communist Party over the past year. The latest round of deportations of Taiwanese nationals came ahead Xi Jinping's visit to Cambodia this Thursday. The government of Taiwan had previously requested the repatriation of its citizens in recognition of national jurisdiction. Since 2016, Cambodia has deported around 600 Taiwanese nationals to China. Their whereabouts remain unknown to Taiwanese authorities.
And while the PLA attempts to intimidate the people of Taiwan and demonstrate coercive capabilities, these actions are backfiring, drawing increased global attention and accelerating Taiwan's own defense preparations.
Earlier this week, Xi Jinping visited Malaysia, a country that hosts a series of teapot refineries through which Venezuelan and Iranian oil are rebranded and sold to the Chinese Communist Party, thus circumventing U.S. sanctions. In 2024, Malaysia's oil exports tripled the amount of Malaysian oil produced, suggesting that 2/3 of its exports come from China's oil shadow market.
Russia's growing military cooperation with China adds another layer of complexity, creating a compounded challenge with the deepening cooperation among China, Russia, and North Korea. And China and Russia's Pacific Fleet is a growth enterprise.
Also this week, the Chinese Communist Party participated in the 3rd national meeting of coordinators of the group of Friends in Defense of the UN Charter in Moscow alongside authoritarian allies Russia, Iran, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, and Belarus. The Chinese Communist Party will also host an informal meeting at the UN General Assembly next week to discuss international trade. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
President Trump telling reporters today he's very confident he could reach a trade deal with the European Union. That's as he hosted Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni at the White House. Joining us now to discuss these latest developments is National Security Advisor Casey Fleming. He's the CEO of Black Ops Partners. Casey, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again with Meloni's visit today. Some are saying this is a sign the European Union is fracturing, with Politico noting that might benefit China. What do you make of this?
Well, that's China's plan, is to fracture the rest of the free world. The EU is part of that, of course, to fracture that so they can actually build upon a stronger alliance with their side of the world. the communist side of the world. So the entire plan is to unwind the U.S. power structure throughout the rest of the world and replace it with the Chinese communist power structure. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to splinter the European Union, but that's time will tell. The tariffs are something that it's a lever that Trump can use against China because of the trade balance right now is so unfair and unwieldy. That's one of the levers that Trump can use to get things back in order and put control and power back over China.
On that note, President Trump also said today, quote, "We're going to make a very good deal with China." This comes amid the news of 245% tariffs on certain Chinese goods. Now, Beijing has countered by stopping the exports of 7 rare earth metals and magnets that are crucial to America's defense industry, which U.S. officials are taking notice of. But Trump did say today that the two sides are actively talking amid these escalating tariffs. In your view, what would bring Beijing to the negotiating table on trade?
Time with these tariffs and what they will do to the Chinese economy is something that would bring them back to the table to negotiate. Right now, it's like I said, it's unbalanced the way that it sits, and finally, Trump is using a lever, which is tariffs, to bring it back in line. So reciprocal tariffs is where it should be, where it should end up. But you can see that China is at war with the United States. This is economic war that's being played out in front of us.
Now, speaking of balancing, the Wall Street Journal suggests that the Trump administration is seeking to strike trade deals with 70 countries, including a condition that they reduce economic ties and trade with Beijing. That's in return for lower tariffs from the U.S. Now, if Trump is successful in this, how big of a blow would this be to China, which relies quite a lot on exports?
It would be a significant blow to China. Their economy is on the ropes right now, and to have something like this come in and disrupt the revenue flow into China and into their economy and eventually their military and national security is a significant blow. So it's something that needs to be played out for the long haul. It's not something that should be just given into just to fire a shot across the bow, if you will. It's something that needs to be drawn out to regain control over a regime that has no intention of coexisting with anyone, including the United States. Their total goal is total takeover of the world. And, this is a tool that's being used before anything has to go to a conventional war. But it is economic war, like I said, being played out.
And Casey, with the global tariffs, Chinese leader Xi Jinping has been courting Asian countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia, suggesting that China is the reliable partner in the face of what he is calling unilateral bullying by the U.S. In your view, how likely is Xi to be successful in countering Trump's strategy to cut China off?
He won't be that successful. However, the Asian bloc, he'll be successful with the Asian bloc because they're close neighbors. But their economies are very small compared to the EU and the rest of the free world. So that's really what's at stake right now. And it's not for the faint of heart, but it needs to happen to rebalance trade and rebalance the world order right now. And it unfortunately has gone on, the scales have tipped towards China in the past and in the very recent past. We've got to tip them back to the United States.
Now, on that note, there is a growing trend on TikTok in which Chinese influencers are urging Americans to buy goods supposedly made for U.S. and European luxury brands like Hermes directly from them to save on import duties. Now, there are questions around whether or not these are the same goods that would have ended up in the luxury stores. But what do you make of this method of skirting these import duties?
It shows that the Chinese Communist Party follow no rules. No economic rules, no international laws that we have. Now, the products that they're focusing on are through DHgate and using DHgate and shipping directly through shippers as well as mail systems. So they're trying to bypass the whole tariff issue by going direct to these factories. And most of those goods are the knockoff goods. They're not the original goods, but I'm sure that some of the original goods, the legitimate goods are getting through, but most of those are the knockoffs that are sold through DHgate.
And Casey, zooming out a bit with all the latest developments in trade, what do you see as next in terms of U.S.-China relations?
They're going to be testy. and it needs to happen. It needs to happen because China has had years and years of free reign and infiltration and subversion into the U.S. and to the free world, and they need to be throttled back. And if they want to continue to play in the global scene. But again, China's total plan all along for decades has been complete global takeover. They view that they ran the world for 5,000 years. They were the original civilization for 5,000 years, and they want to get back to it as fast as they possibly can.
A lot at stake for sure. Casey Fleming, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
House lawmakers are warning Americans about Chinese AI app DeepSeek. After an investigation, they say it's the Chinese Communist Party's most recent tool for espionage and theft. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
The House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party say the CCP is using AI app DeepSeek as one of their latest dual-use efforts for, quote, spying, stealing, and subverting U.S. export control restrictions. In a Wednesday report, the committee highlights their key findings. One, DeepSeek funnels data to the CCP through back-end infrastructure. DeepSeek covertly manipulates results to align with CCP propaganda and Chinese law. DeepSeek highly likely uses stolen U.S. AI models. And DeepSeek appears to use NVIDIA chips banned for export to China. In the report, the committee makes these recommendations. 1. Swiftly expand export controls, improve export control enforcement, and address risks from AI models from China. And prevent and prepare for strategic surprise related to advanced AI. Along with DeepSeek, TikTok has also received a lot of similar attention from lawmakers, experts, and users alike. Many point to the app's algorithm being used to sway a user's opinion to the CCP's benefit. Many allege that the algorithm often covertly aligns with CCP propaganda and censorship. TV personality and businessman Kevin O'Leary made a $20 billion bid to buy TikTok. He testified in Congress last week and was asked about his findings when he investigated the app.
TikTok is weapons-grade spyware, period. It's one of the best propaganda machines I've ever seen. And if you want evidence of it, go on in the last 24 hours and look at the videos generated there through AI of overweight Americans at sewing machines, even the president himself depicted here, or over iPhones screwing in screws with the message, "Let's make America great again." I have never seen such blatant propaganda.
And O'Leary said that Senator Tim Cotton told him that Congress would not allow anyone to buy TikTok with its current algorithm. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
And what do everyday Americans think about a possible ban on TikTok? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from them.
I wouldn't want somebody having access to my data that I didn't know about.
Well, I don't know much about TikTok. I'm in baby boomers, so we don't keep up with that much.
Whatever keeps everybody safe, and it's in our best interest. So yeah, if they ban it, if it's for for good cause, for good reason, it makes sense.
China's notorious for stealing IP, and that's been the big issue with trading with China. I think that's part of the negotiation, at least I hope it is more security for IP.
The Chinese use it for an educational tool, and they give them access to educational benefits instead of the type of disruption that we get here in the United States.
The board of governors of TikTok, whoever's control of TikTok, has to make that ethical decision, right? Either you're going to stick with them and face the consequences, or you're going to cut ties and, save a lot of Americans' personal data, whatever this is.
Are you concerned about China potentially manipulating our, TikTok's algorithm here in the United States?
Yeah. I mean, I think these algorithms are kind of a slippery slope, in terms of, getting information out there that, I don't know, that doesn't start off politically slanted, but kind of, I could see how it can insidiously, morph into that.
I wouldn't want them to have control over it or have the information or my information, So I would not be happy with that.
There has to be some sort of transparency. You can't link Chinese companies or government entities to American data.
Coming up in the NBA, the Milwaukee Bucks get some good news regarding injured All-Star Damian Lillard. Dave Martin joins us to discuss. And scientists make a major discovery on a planet beyond our solar system. Why they think the faraway world is teeming with life when we come back. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on today, but let's start in the NFL as free agent quarterback Aaron Rodgers discussed his release from the New York Jets on the Pat McAfee show today. How did Rodgers describe that meeting?
In a word, brief. Now, he said he flew cross country from California to New Jersey to meet with the Jets, specifically new head coach Aaron Glenn and new general manager Darren Mucci. This is back in February. Now, instead, so I think Rodgers had the expectation going into this meeting he would talk, they would talk, and they'd come and do a decision about whether he was going to play with them next year or not. Instead, he said just seconds into the meeting, they told him that they were going another way with quarterback. He said he was confused. He thought this could have been taken care of in a phone call. So it sounds like there was some kind of miscommunication there. Anyway, so the Jets officially released him in March. So he's been a free agent ever since. He did confirm he's met with a couple of teams here, Minnesota Vikings, New York Giants, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are his best bet. Now, Rodgers said retirement is still an option as well. I mean, the guy is 41 years old. He also said regarding the draft next week that that's going to have no impact on his decision. So really, I still think it's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers here, but he can probably wait until July when they have training camp to start. So maybe not an impending decision yet on Aaron Rodgers, as I've been hoping for.
Shifting gears to college football, longtime ESPN college football analyst Lee Corso announced he'll retire from College Game Day in August after nearly 40 years.
Yeah, I can't believe it. He's going to be 90 years old when that show starts in August. He's been with ESPN for that show since 1987. The guy's a very entertaining guy. He's known for two things. One, when he would disagree with someone, he would say, "Not so fast, my friend." Of course, he did it in a very funny way, of course. Also, every time he made a prediction, he would put like the headgear on of the mascot of the team he was predicting to win. There he is right there with Florida State doing that. Always very entertaining because, of course, ESPN Game Day is usually on campus, so it's in front of students. Usually it's at the site of a big game. So sometimes he would pick the other team, he'd rattle students up, something like that. He was a very funny guy. Now, he's a former college football coach himself, coached at Indiana, Louisville, and Northern Illinois. Played college football at Florida State. In fact, his roommate was none other than Burt Reynolds way back in the day. He was very good friends with Burt Reynolds. So I'm thinking we carry on the legacy here of Lee Corso. I mean, I can put on some headgear every time you actually need to make a prediction. What do you think? That should be fun, right?
You're going to need a big storage room for all those headgears.
It'll be fun, though. I'll have fun doing it.
Moving to NBA news, the Milwaukee Bucks said All-Star Damian Lillard has been cleared of his deep vein thrombosis and is no longer on blood thinners. When will he return to court?
Yeah, the Bucks actually did not give a timetable on his return, except that they said he will not be playing Saturday. That's the game one of the playoffs. Now, he last played March 18, so about a month ago. Amazingly, the Bucks 10-4 since, including winning their last 8 in a row. Now, fortunately for the Bucks, they've had some, playoff troubles the last few years with injuries. Him and Giannis Antetokounmpo were both injured for last year. In fact, Giannis missed most of the last 2 years of the playoffs, and not coincidentally, he lost in the first round each time. But Giannis will be able to play. I mean, he's a 2-time MVP, so you definitely want him there. So anyway, they play the 4th-seeded Indiana Pacers. That series starts Saturday. Last night, though, in the NBA, Miami and Dallas won their games, so they will play Friday night against Atlanta and Memphis, respectively. Winners of those games will be the final 2 playoff spots. As I said, the playoffs start on Saturday. And I don't know if you saw there, but you saw Damian Lillard doing his thing there. That means it's Dame time. Pretty clever, right, Damian?
All right, well, looking at the NHL, tonight is the final day of the regular season. How are playoffs shaping up?
All the spots have finally been clinched. Now, Montreal Canadiens, they clinched the final spot last night when they beat Carolina 4-2. But tonight, as you said, last night of the regular season. Now, Tampa Bay's Nikita Kucherov leads all players with 121 points. I think he's got a 5-point lead there. He plays tonight to hopefully for him wrap up the points lead. Also, we've got Washington's Alex Ovechkin, who just passed Wayne Gretzky for the all-time goal leads. He's at 896 for his career. He's got 43 this season, tied for fourth. It's possible he could get 4 goals and be the first player to get 900. I'm not counting on it, though, Tiff. But anyway, Friday night the league has off, and then the playoffs start Saturday with 2 games: St. Louis versus Winnipeg and Colorado versus Dallas. So, like I've said all week, big day Saturday. Both the NHL and NBA playoffs start then.
All right, a lot of updates coming then. Davis, always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
In a potential landmark discovery, scientists have found what they call the strongest signs yet of possible life beyond our solar system. They've detected gases in an alien planet's atmosphere that are produced only by biological processes.
That is a major breakthrough in our search for life beyond the solar system. Not only that there is a chance that the planet can actually be habitable, but what we are finding is that we are demonstrating that it is possible to detect biosignatures around in atmospheres of such planets around nearby stars with existing facilities, and that's a big breakthrough.
The 2 gases were found on planet K2-18b. They are only generated on Earth by living organisms, such as marine phytoplankton or algae. Researchers say the discovery suggests the planet may be teeming with tiny life forms. The planet is nearly 9 times as massive as Earth, and it's in what's called a habitable zone, where liquid water can exist on its surface. It's about 124 light years from Earth in the constellation Leo. And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.